Entertainment marketing in Hollywood has recently taken to the next level, far beyond movie trailers and lobby displays. Today's audiences are more sophisticated, which marketing teams are addressing by blurring the lines of themed entertainment with elaborate, immersive attractions that place fans directly into the worlds they represent. Experiential activities are hot, and Midsummer has some of the trailblazers in the industry here today. Please welcome to the stage, Executive Vice President of Operations for Experiential at GranDesign, Christie Decker. Chief Creative Officer and co-founder at Mycotoo Incorporated, David F. Wally. Immersive experience designer and founder of Blackout, Josh Randall. And your host, senior editor for The Verge, Bryan Bishop. Ladies and gentlemen, the Hollywood Goes Immersive presentation.
Thank you. First of all, everybody, thank you for coming out to Hollywood Goes Immersive. I'm Bryan Bishop with The Verge, and I'm really excited to be talking with all of these guys. It's going to be a really fun panel. But first off, I want to start with the show of hands. How many people here in this room were able to see the 9-volt house for It last year? Now, how many more of you heard about it? Okay, how many of you here were able to go check out the Westworld experience at South by Southwest, where they literally built Sweetwater? But how many of you heard about it? Okay, that's why this panel exists, right? Because over the last decade, we've had immersive theater mixed with haunts and getting cool forms of interactive horror. But at the same time that's been going on, brands, agencies, studios, and networks have realized that interactive immersive experiences can be this cool thing that audiences engage with in totally different ways. So here on stage, Blade Runner 2049, Blackout, Stranger's Experience, It House, all you guys have done some really, really incredible work in this space. So I just want to start at the top. How did you get into making immersive branded experiences in the first place?
You're looking at me, so I'll start. For myself, it came out of Blackout. Blackout started in 2009. It was an immersive theater experience that started in New York and traveled to LA and Chicago and San Francisco. And we, last couple of years, did it in Oregon and New Orleans for the Overlook Film Festival. And I think from the exposure that Blackout had, the first call that we got was from Blumhouse in 2013 to start working on the Verge franchise, and it kind of spiraled from there.
David?
Somebody hires me. That's where I usually start. I think the first thing that we try to figure out is what is sort of the call to action from the Uber client, the IP holder. What is it they're trying to achieve? And invariably, what I think they're trying to do and what I'm usually trying to do is I'm trying to figure out a way to make the audience and guests feel like they're inside the idea. They're inside the property. So they're inside Blade Runner 2049, or they're inside Westworld, or they're inside Fallout 76. And then it's a process of trying to figure out how do you actually achieve that, and how do you craft something that is familiar to the audience and the guests and the viewers without being able to actually duplicate characters and exact plot points from their IP, because they don't want you to do that. And I think that when you find that sweet spot of something that somebody walks in and feels like this is something that might be happening just across the street or right around the corner, that's where you sort of won.
Right. But what was your background before this too? Because you weren't always working in this field, right?
No. Well, I started off way back when I was young and beautiful in the theater, and then once I decided to leave college and go conquer the world 99 people at a time, I realized there was no money in that. So then I moved out to Hollywood and I got in the film business, and I did that for close to 20 years. And then once I sort of got utterly fried with that experience, I found my way into this new field that I didn't even know existed, which is called location-based entertainment. And for those of you who still may not know what that field is, themed entertainment it's basically, imagine, 50, 60 years ago, somebody had an idea and a white piece of paper and started doodling what Disneyland might be, or what a great museum might be, or any kind of great event, what Blackout might be, what it might be. And I joined that space of people who were taking that blank piece of paper and trying to create worlds that were location-based. And from that, I got to Dark Harbor and started doing that, which I never ever had seen as a haunt, but just a gigantic canvas for immersive theater. And then that eventually led into these brand activations that we've been doing a lot of the last couple of years.
Gotcha. And Christie, what about you? What was your path to this world?
Yeah, very similar to you. We do all experiential at GranDesign, so we just kind of wait for the clients who know that it's a good investment to put their money into it. And movie studios, thankfully, have been doing more and more of that. So with it, people, they want someone to go inside and feel the movie, be able to touch it, feel that real scare that they get beyond just, in a movie seat. So, yeah.
I'm curious, now you guys have all been doing this for various amounts of time, but when you look back at how this has evolved in the last 5-10 years, is there any kind of particular, incident, inflection point, or cultural trend that you think is driving, not necessarily the business, but the audience interest in these kind of experiences?
I would say social media, for sure. Just wanting to share that experience.
I think that's right, and I think that we're seeing it in sort of these Instagram palaces too, where everybody wants to sort of feel like they're there, they're at the place. And if you're really, really old like me, and you think of things where people talked about augmented reality and these things you put on your head, and now it's more sophisticated with VR glasses, you're able to visually transport yourself to another place, but it still remains a voyeuristic sort of passive experience more often than not. And I think that once you pierce that veil, which is I think something we did very effectively with Blade Runner, is it started off as a VR experience. And while you had the VR glasses on, we flew the wall out. And then when your VR experience ended and you took off the goggles, you were in the space, you were in the world of the movie. And you'd see people in the seats sitting there sort of just like this and enjoying it. I'm sure they were having a very good intellectual time. But once they took the glasses off and they were walking around the space, then you saw the smiles, then you saw people feeling it. And it was a human connection, You were emotionally feeling that you were inside sharing that space instead of just intellectually connected to it. So for me, I think that's the bridge that these things are crossing, is it's making a connection with the heart, not just the mind.
I'm going to second the social media reach thing, because I think, as you already pointed out today, that not many people actually get to experience these things. And so it almost becomes a marketing tactic, whether they want it to or not. And I think that's something that was always clear with Blackout from the very beginning. Because it's an individual experience, you can only walk through one at a time. It has an incredibly low throughput, but in terms of its reputation and popularity, it spread so fast through social media, through people posting, walkthroughs and things, that ultimately that translating into these marketing activations within genuine marketing departments just seemed like a natural trajectory.
Gotcha. And what's the creative process like? Because David with Dark Harbor and Josh with Blackout, you kind of can do your own thing to a certain degree. I'm sure it has to be a very, very different collaborative experience than working with Blade Runner or Westworld or Castle Rock, anything like that. Can you talk about the differences between that in the creative process?
Sure. So it's always sort of a one or the other thing, is in my experience, in that when I get brought onto a project like this, usually there is a conversation that's had with the client in the very beginning. And if there's not this conversation, then it just leads to a lot of problems, and that's a little bit of experience, kind of learning on the fly thing that I've encountered, which is, do you want me to execute your vision for you, or do you want me to bring my creativity to the table? Are you asking me to create a show out of my own head, give me all the IP, give me all the source material, give me all this crazy shit, and I will put something together for you? Or do you want to just tell me what you want and you want me to execute it? And if we could solve that within the first couple of meetings, it just makes the entire process go down so much easier. The most aggravating thing that I think I've encountered within these marketing activations is you spend months and months and months coming up with ideas and writing scripts and making changes and adding this and taking that out. And then at the end of the day, the client just goes, I really just kind of wanted what we said in that first meeting. And you just kind of bang your head on the table because you put all this effort into it, and ultimately they just called you to execute what they wanted. The Strangers for me was an experience where I basically just had total free reign. I mean, they came in to look at the venue, and they came in like the second day after it opened. Like, they almost weren't even that concerned. I shouldn't say they weren't concerned. I'm sure they were really concerned, but they didn't really show it in that way. And they were just sort of like, we trust you. We hired you for a reason. Go do what you do. Castle Rock, very different experience. And that was, many companies, and a real, when you're working with Stephen King, like, it's just, every word has to get approved, every word in the script is analyzed. Do we have the rights to put an Easter egg from Cujo in? And like, no, we don't. So, okay, that comes out. So, the Hulu Castle Rock experience was one that was almost dictated by the executives, whereas The Strangers was more free reign. And then you have people like Blumhouse that sort of have their hand in it, but also trust you to do your own thing too. So I think the big thing for me approaching these things is trying to get the client to answer that question in the very beginning. Am I here to execute your vision, or did you hire me to give you something in my head?
Yeah, go ahead. No,
For me, it's very similar to the process that you're talking about. With it, they came to us and they had this big idea to dream big, no budget. Then you do dream big, and then they show you the budget, and you're like, oh, okay. And they usually call me the dream killer because it's totally different. So the It House didn't start out like that. It started out as a VR bus that we brought to a couple destinations. And the reactions were so epic, they just threw more money at it. And they were like, let's do that It House, which was our first idea, which they ended up coming back, and we had like 10 days to build it, which always makes it a little bit more interesting. But it ended up being so epic, and the CMO really attributed a lot of the success of the movie to that experience, which I think is great for all of us.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to these guys. I generally find in everything you're trying to do is you're trying to get everybody to agree that we're all looking at the same thing. Because at the end of the day, everybody in life has different perspectives, different approaches to things. Our perspective is we're looking out at you guys. Your perspective is you're looking at us. Unless we're looking at something in between us, we're looking at different things. So it's always trying to get people to agree this is what we're trying to accomplish, and to get there, as Josh said, as soon as you possibly can. And then for me, as a creative, is I'm then just trying to drive to where I think it needs to go as hard and as fast as I can, and check in with people along the way and just say, we're doing good, right? Everything okay? Anything we need to double back on? Because at the end of the day, I think most people want to believe that you know what you're doing and know that you have a vision and know that you have the direction you're getting to. And if you can convey to them and instill in them the trust that you do know where you're going, they'll usually follow you there. And then sometimes, occasionally, you get people who just don't want to play nice, and those experiences can be hard.
I mean, it strikes me as such an interesting problem because this is such a nascent medium in a lot of ways, right? You're talking about haunts and things that are scary. In some ways I go, the Stranger's experience, Josh Michael makes sense. In another way, I can't think of the marketing executive going like, okay, cool, the waterboarding guy from Blackout, he'll sell our thing. Like, it doesn't seem like a great fit. Like, you guys run into problems, when people are just like scared because they don't know what this stuff is?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think this is something you and I mentioned the other day on our phone call together, but like, I would almost argue that like 80% of what I do on those things is educating the executives why I'm doing what I'm doing, and to just back the fuck off. Yeah. Like, in the sense that 9 times out of 10, they just don't understand what it takes to put on a live event. I actually had somebody say to me 2 weeks ago when they said, I have a VAP, where is that actress? And I said, she's in the bathroom. And he literally said, what do you mean she's in the bathroom? Like, what do you mean she took a bathroom break? I was like, she's human, she's not a robot. Like, what do you mean? But that level of, like, they don't even understand the concept of, it's an actor, it's an 8-hour shift, they need to have a lunch break, they need to go to the bathroom. You can't just walk press through at any time, like you have to coordinate this stuff. So I think for me, it's a lot of it is educating and walking, it's almost being a director to them as well as the production, because you kind of have to walk them through what's happening and how to understand it. And as David was saying, like, to make sure we're all looking at the same thing. Because I think we understand it as a process, and they understand it as a movie set. It's either ready or it's not. And that's just not the way live events work.
And the thing is like, you could have all the success in the world in the last thing you did, and you could be working with the same agency that you worked with on the last one, but you're probably working with a new IP holder, and they weren't on that journey with you. So they have to be reassured all over again, just like the last one was. And invariably, when you're doing good work, they'll come up to you finally when it's ready to open, and people are coming through and smiling and taking pictures, posting stuff, and then you're their best friend. You know what I mean? Because then you won, and then everybody can relax and be happy. But I think because of the amount of dollars that go into these things, you know, it's oftentimes a very large, if not the largest portion of a marketing budget sometimes to get one of these things open. And if we blow it, if we drop the ball creatively, then they fail, you know, and they're not looking to fail, they're looking to win every time.
And what can be frustrating sometimes in that, when it is all these marketing budgets, you know, they're like, well, what if the director doesn't like it? What if the actor doesn't like it? You know, what if the studio people don't like it? And I was like, don't forget, it's the consumers who have to like it. They're the ones who are experiencing, that's what we're doing this for. You know, I've had things where we've done things for content, and then the actress didn't like it, I won't name names. So we had to shut down the whole thing, when I thought it was gonna be so amazing, people were so excited for it. So it's like, you always have to remind them who it's for.
You sure you can't tell us what awesome thing a terrible actor ruined?
I won't do that.
It's funny you mention that though, and I do think you're exactly right, but for me creatively, if I'm writing or I'm directing, because I can't write for everybody's taste, I can't try to please everybody, for me I'm always feel like I'm writing or directing for one person. Do you know what I mean? And so for me, with Blade Runner, when I saw the director come through and smiling and looking around and nodding his head, it's like, I didn't give a shit what anybody else said, you know what I mean? When Lisa Joy and Chris and Jonah Nolan were walking up Sweetwater and nodding and smiling and laughing, it was like, that's when I relaxed, you know, because if those people weren't creatively happy with it, then it's hard to imagine that the people who were devotees of their product can be happy with it.
Are there different kinds of best practices you all look at when doing one of these pieces versus what would be a standalone, you know, immersive piece? You've got so many elements, right? You've got, like, you want to get a broader audience reach probably than like an immersive theater community would be. You have people that love that IP and have a really strong relationship with it. Are there different considerations that go into your process?
Not for me, to be honest. It's all kind of, it all comes down to just wanting to create an effective experience. And a lot of times, I personally just kind of like to work on my feet in the room a lot. I'm not so big on a lot of preparation and stuff. And so a lot of times, it's just sort of gathering all the source material and jumping in the room, and it's a very similar thing for Blackout. It's about being effective. The best idea on paper may not be the best idea in the room. And so I don't even care about going through the whole paper process. I just want to jump in the room and see what happens. And I think, you know, if I've developed anything over the course of the last, 20 years working in this industry, it's like, I think I have a vague idea of how to put some of these live events together, and kind of seeing what's effective. And I can watch somebody walk through a show and go, he didn't feel anything or she didn't feel anything. I can see it in their face. And I gotta get the show up to a point where every single person is having some sort of reaction. And that's really the most important thing, and always has been for me. And then the IP and the content and the, content comes and goes, and IP changes, but I'm hired to create an effective experience, and bottom line, that's just what I try to do.
For me, it's never about just me. There's this great quote by Jeff Perry from the Steppenwolf Theater Company. They asked him, why did you guys get out of college and form this theater together? And they said we were scared to audition. But what he said, what it really was this sense of community, this sense of collaboration. And he said, it was rare, it is rare, it shall always be rare for a group of people to decide what they can create together is greater than what they can create alone. And so for me, whether I'm doing something that's, gotta last for decades, like a theme park or a museum, or something that has the ephemeral life of 3 days at Comic-Con or South by Southwest, I'm trying to get everybody who I'm working with and collaborating with to all go all in with me. Do you know what I mean? If I'm going to be putting this effort in, if I'm going to be focusing on these things, my expectation is that the people that I'm leading are going to do that too. And I'm setting expectations of where I'm expecting us all to get to. Because if I'm super prepared for one of the 1.5 days of rehearsal I get before I have to open it, then I know we're going to be better if the other 30 or 40 or 50 people are also going to have done that preparation coming into it. And when that happens, I think that sometimes what we can do is extraordinary. And sometimes, you'll find somebody who just doesn't show up, and then it's sort of like, then you spend your day and a half having to figure out how am I going to get this person somewhere, or replace them. Yeah.
One thing that we like to do is always kind of like create a demand. So with the It House, we put out a website, it was reservation only, and for the whole month we were out in like 20 minutes. And then we blasted out there, okay, you guys can come and wait in line too. And we had like an 8-hour line almost every day. So that, monkey see, monkey do. We see people online, people get online. Coming from Comic-Con, that really is true. If you see a line, you get in line. If we're giving out, macaroni and cheese flavored Oreos, no one's gonna come get it. But if you're like, one per person, people start flocking to you. It's kind of a good tactic.
On the business side of it, you were talking about budgets earlier, Christie. How big of a spend is one of these things? And like on It, right? That's a good example. How big a part of that was that? How much traction did it get for the success of the film? Like, I'm wondering if studios are doing more and more of these. Is this just like a fad they may veer away from, or is this actually becoming something that can seem like it can sustain and like it's going to become a huge part of the thing going forward?
I hope it's sustainable. My whole business. They do say that it grows like 5% every year, and in 2 to 3 years, I think I read that it's going to be 50% of marketing budgets are going to go towards experiential and experiences, which is great. You look at the It House, I don't want to say all the budgets and stuff like that, but I have a lot of people come to me with $2 million. I have people come to us with $100,000, and they all want the same takeaway from it.
Exactly.
And you have to treat them as such. Obviously a $2 million budget, you're going to handle it with a bigger team and all that. But that other smaller studio or a smaller brand, that $100,000 is the same as a studio's $2 million. So you still have to handle it as such.
Interestingly enough, too, I just to piggyback off that for a second, working on Castle Rock with Hulu was a specific budget that I can't name. The Strangers was literally 1/20th of that budget, and I would potentially argue The Strangers was more effective. And Blackout was probably it generally is 1/10 of what that Strangers budget was. And I would probably argue that's the most effective of all of those 3 shows. So I think they're throwing a lot of money at it, and it's up to us to figure out what we have at our disposal, and to make the experience as effective as possible at choosing.
I think that's exactly right. I think you have to look at each thing individually. If everybody comes to me and says, hey, we want to do Westworld with this thing, it's like, you can't do Westworld with this thing. This thing doesn't lend itself to Westworld. What you have to ask yourself is, what's going to be cool about your property that's going to get the same type of buzz and attention that Westworld got, but you can't replicate the experience. You have to figure out how to make that experience compelling, unique, and buzzworthy.
Yeah.
This also gets to the idea of audience sophistication though too, right? Because I talked to people that went to Westworld. It was the first time they've been in like an immersive interactive environment. Same with It House, right? Now those people do another thing, they're going to know a little bit more about what this form is. It's going to be harder to impress them, right? And if 50% of budgets moving forward, there's going to be more and more experiences. People are going to get better and better and better and more used to these things. How do you deal with an audience that basically is going to be expecting more?
I think first of all, you don't copy yourself. You know, you have to. You know, it's like saying, how do you after the first movie make another movie? You know, you have to make another movie. You have to make a different movie. And sometimes you find movies that come out and it feels like, oh, it's Die Hard on a bus. It's Die Hard on a train. It's Die Hard in an airplane. You know, and at some point somebody has to say, let's stop making Die Hard. Let's make something else. And so I think, you know, as Christie was just saying, you know, we had a budget that was like here for Westworld. And this last weekend, I did the Godzilla Street Team that had a budget like this. But we went in and we figured out what's going to get people talking about Godzilla. What's going to get people hashtagging, you know, global sciences, monarch sciences. You know, what's going to get people smiling when they walk by you and walk away remembering, what did you do about Comic-Con? Oh, blah, 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 blah. Oh, these people came around with their signs talking about Godzilla. You know, you're still putting in the work. You're still trying to get the message across. And the dollars shouldn't matter that much at the end of the day if you're doing good work.
I mean, I would say, like with it was a remake, a reimagination of the movie, so we were already held to a really high standard there, because they were going to have a lot of nostalgic fans come through. So the first take at it with the VR, AR bus, I mean, I think technology is definitely going to help us kind of move the needle there. You know, you can kind of put on glasses and now you're really there, and then the next thing will be, you know, then you kind of put the smells of the sewer when you're walking down there, and then you kind of have a breeze, and then you're sitting in a chair that kind of moves. So just little things like that always kind of build it up.
Gotcha. You know, one of the things that, as somebody that likes this kind of work, just, you know, outside of like activation side of it, one thing I really think is really wonderful about this kind of these activations is that more audiences get exposed to this kind of work, may not otherwise know about it. It's an opportunity for more creators to get to do work and play with like fun IPs and that kind of stuff. But I'm curious about where all of you think this as an art form and a medium goes from here. Like, this is a big injection of both audience interest and capital into like getting to make these things. How does it evolve and grow?
Well, I think, you know, we're kind of seeing the democratization, I guess, to a certain extent of this with the growing of Meow Wolf, with the opening of 2-Bit Circus, with Evermore Park, with
Sleep No More.
Sleep No More, to a certain extent, debatable, but either way, I think that because Sleep No More is so old and they only were old, anyway, I could go down there. But we're seeing it happen. We're seeing these sort of centers being created for this kind of experiential entertainment. Obviously, Meow Wolf has the sort of art side. 2-Bit is kind of doing the game thing. Kind Heaven is sort of doing the music thing. So people are starting to find niches even within this larger experiential world and starting to create bigger, larger pieces, and looking at Westworld and Blade Runner and the It House and Castle Rock, and like, obviously it's starting to happen more. I would argue that the Meow Wolf 2-Bit kind of model is sort of gonna be the one that pushes it that much farther. I don't know how much farther we can get in the just straight up Comic-Con world, as David and I were just sort of joking about walking up here. Like, Comic-Con is a nightmare. Trying to do any of these shows with this kind of budget for 4 days is like a joke. They have no time to build it. They have no time to really finesse it the way these things need to be finessed. And so I think those are really strong, awesome activations, but I do think they're probably already hitting a certain ceiling, but the companies that are now starting to dedicate themselves to these experiences are going to be able to push the boundary a little bit farther. That would probably be my 2 cents.
I'm curious, you mentioned the Meow Wolf, 2-bit model. Why do you think that's the path forward?
Because these companies are being developed to create hubs and models and sort of epicenters to develop this work. It's not just about producing the work, it's actually about developing it. And I think within the development, within the R&D, the research and development that happens within that immersive experiential world, we're gonna start being able to connect more technology, connect more VR, and connect all of those things where, someone like Hulu, they want a show for 4 days, right? So there's a cap to how much they're willing to spend, how much time they're willing to put into that. 2-Bit, obviously I know from firsthand, is we're developing this this stuff. We're testing stuff out. And so there are certain things that we're starting that are getting thrown away and other things that are working that we're pushing farther on. I don't know about you guys, but like Blackout for me never had any sort of R&D element. It was just we needed to put on a show, so we put on a show. And I think that that level of innovation will come from those new companies.
For me, the only thing I'd say that, and maybe we're talking about the same thing, maybe you see it slightly differently, but when we talk about these activations, at the end of the day, whether it's $100,000, it's $2 million, the marketing department has decided this is the roll of the dice. And it is ephemeral. It is for a few days or a week or a couple of weeks. And they're either going to win or they're going to lose. Either this cuts through and their marketing dollars are well spent and they have success, or they don't. When you talk about something that's sustainable, then you're down to a whole different calculus. Now you're talking about business plans, and now you're talking about, is your product, is your content repeatable? What is the throughput? Can you get enough people through there to pay for the investment you made? How long is it going to make to get your money back out of it? Do you have a long enough life that you can get your money back out of it? Or are you thumbs down after a first weekend because everybody can Roman gladiate you on their phones, within 5 seconds now? So that when you're talking about something that's a bigger investment like that has to be a permanent installation or a longer term play, I think then the stakes go up and you really start seeing people contemplating their navels about, are we doing the right thing, and do we really have the intestinal fortitude to move forward without a gazillion notes coming from every angle? Whereas with the marketing thing, oftentimes you get a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, 3 months to plan the thing, and you're kind of on a sprint to get it done. Sort of like, I think if we do it well, we get everybody to jump on the stage goes with us and just start racing towards the finish line. It'll be interesting to see how all of those different things that Josh was talking about play out sustainably over years and decades.
I mean, that brings up a big challenge that, I don't know if you guys face the same thing, but, is the impression numbers and how to quantitate what we do. A lot of the times we're up against budgets that go towards billboards, or bus shelters, and they can say definitively, because of, Nielsen ratings, that, 100,000 people a day are gonna see that billboard. And with us, we don't have those kind of numbers. So, trying to, and this is the challenge, is trying to get some analytics behind what we do is something that will definitely push forward what we do. It's just, it's hard. I think that, we kind of need to change the way marketing execs look at the word impression. Because an impression for a billboard is just someone looking at it and then going about their day. But the impression that you get in an experience, that's such like a more memorable experience. That brings brand loyalty. That is like really a conversation with your consumer. So I hope that we can kind of change the way that's looked at.
And how do you quantify that? How do they say like, oh yes, this one did well, this one did not do well?
I mean, we kind of piggyback off, sometimes what the numbers are, but, I don't know if anyone here has seen that YouTube, it's content, it was for the Cara movie, where they had kind of written a coffee shop to make it look like a girl kind of was putting someone up. Cara ended up doing terrible in the box offices, but people look at that video all the time. So it's so tough, it's tough to put any kind of quantitative number behind what we do. I don't know if you guys have a better answer for that.
No, I mean, we had a large conversation at the end of Castle Rock where just sort of internally on some of the crew, we all pulled out our calculators and kind of, we had the final numbers, we knew what the budget was, we knew how many people went through, we kind of, subtracted this and added this, and we sort of figured out that they almost spent a little more than $600 a person to go through the Castle Rock experience. So how the hell do you quantify that? And especially with something like Hulu, how many of those people went and got a Hulu subscription, right? It's not even, did they watch the show? Because maybe they went to a friend's house to watch the show, right? So, how do you do that? How do you quantify that? And I have no idea, but no one's asking.
I think also, marketing dollars, for a product that's going to be around, for 20 years, for a car or for bleach or something like that is entirely different than something when you're talking about a launch. When you're talking about a TV show that's coming out or a movie that's going out, we can do everything we can to give them the buzz they want to coming out of that weekend or that week that's leading into the thing. that precedes the reviews, that precedes the opening weekend or the first Nielsen's thing. But at the end of the day, then they're gonna live and die on whether or not their movie or their show is good.
Right.
And it's not gonna be about us anymore.
Yeah.
So all that we can really do is sort of help set the table for them to have success.
There's actually been a couple instances with a movie that they knew was going to do really bad in the box office, but they had to invest a lot of money just to show the directors and the actors that they were working hard on it. So we call it like putting lipstick on a pig. You know, there's been a couple shows that they knew were not going to do well, but they still put a lot of money towards it.
I'm guessing you're not going to tell us what those ones were on there.
I guess I can tell you. Just in my opinion. I mean, like for TBS, the show Wrecked. Is this being recorded?
Yes.
Right there.
All right.
Speaking to the camera.
Never mind. That's something that's a really successful show that everyone loves. Moving on.
Everybody watch it. One thing that's interesting talking about, like, you know, setting up a launch, like part of what makes these activations interesting is scarcity, right? It's like you can only do it at Comic-Con, at South by. I remember talking to HBO after the South by Southwest thing. I'm like, you guys should set this up as a park. And they're like, hell no, we don't ever want to do this. Because it becomes a specially unique thing. You know, is that, I mean, actually don't really have a question here. Don't worry, how do you guys feel about this? Because you're doing this work that exists only for like a flash.
Well, I mean, it's funny because the first activations that I did were for The Purge, for Blumhouse, and then The Purge 2. And then Insidious for Focus Features, and those were very specific 10-city tours. And there was a scarcity model because not too many people could go, but that was 2013. And obviously things have changed since then, but it's interesting that way back in 2013, it was a little, there still was that old school marketing like, no, we need to put this up in 10 cities. This isn't just an LA thing. And so it's been interesting to see how, you know, touring and some of that was part of the model several years ago, but even within 5 short years, now it's just sort of like, put it up in a parking lot for a couple of weeks, call it a day. You know, put it up in Comic-Con for 3 or 4 days or South by, and let's call it a day, and let's not even try to get an extended life out of it. So, you know, I don't know how I feel about it, but right or wrong, it's been interesting to watch that, that path.
I think that the notion of it being an ephemeral experience is part of what makes it magical, to tell you the truth. You know, when I first started in the theater, there was this guy that ran ACT, and he would walk around with a sandwich board trying to get audiences to come in with a sign that said one night only, you know, you'll never see the same show twice, which is sort of what theater and live experiences are. I'm sure you have this with Blackout, I certainly have it with Dark Harbor, it's not just different every year, it's different every night, you know, and that you can't replicate the exact guest experience. Some things will be similar, but some things will be magically different. And each year that I remount Dark Harbor, the first thing everybody wants to know is what's different. You know, what are you doing different this year? Because I don't want to just go back and see what it was before. With Westworld, for example, I don't know how you could do it again because the show's moved on from what that moment in time was, you know, when the HBO marketing guys say to you, why would you want to do it again? They already won. They, you know, they got their success, they planted their flag, that it's move on to a new battlefield.
It's one thing I've been wondering about sorry, I was thinking about the HBO thing. You can make Shogun World, that's what you could do if you want to do it again for season 2. Not to be down here, but one thing that, you know, covering shows by South by Southwest or Comic-Con, you see certain cycles, right? 5 years ago, we talked about VR on this panel. Everybody had a VR activation. If you went to something, that was a component. Now, not so much, right? You know, what's going to prevent that from being the case with, you know, immersive in-person activations?
I mean, I think it's already happening. It's already sort of like, this is, I don't know how you guys feel about this and if everyone's gonna hate me for saying it, but like, you already see it in the immersive theater world. Like there's an oversaturation of sort of immersive experiences that are happening specifically in LA, and by default, there is a lack of interest now. And you have companies that have shown really great success and great promise and are amazing artists that can't always fill their seats the way they did the first or second season that they were running. And so, I mean, to me, it's just like somebody complaining about New York City or LA being like, oh, it's so different than the way it was 10 years ago. Yeah, of course it is. It's an urban environment, things change. That's what happens. We're all on these paths of sort of ups and downs, and things come and they go. And I think it's kind of up to us as creators to just pay attention to that stuff and to continue to do things that we think are relevant, that we think are speaking to people. And if they're no longer speaking to people, it's time to let go and move on. That's my take.
Yeah, creativity is an iterative process. It's not a replicable thing. You know, if you're just doing the same thing you did before, you're right, people are going to stop coming. If you're trying to copycat what everybody else is doing, there's nothing new to see there. But if you're trying to constantly figure out what is different, what can be unique, how can we do this thing differently, 3D movies were all looking alike, where everybody was just doing the same gag out of the middle of the screen, until you found, filmmakers like for Coraline or for Avatar, where it was like, wait a second, what a beautiful template to do production design and have dimensionality on the frames of the screen that aren't the things that are coming out at you. It's just building a bigger picture. It raised the art form, when you could get into digital effects that we couldn't do before. Everybody was doing the same hoary, cheap CGI things until you found artists that started taking those tools and doing really, really cool things with it. So I think people are still making VR. The better people are doing cooler things with VR and trying to take it to the next level. And I think it'll be the same thing with these experiences, that the people that are more thoughtful about it, more invested in it, more creative with it, will keep trying to find new ways to make it continue to be compelling.
Unfortunately for us, I feel like we're always looking at like 16-year-olds to see what they're doing, because that's like the newest thing, right? So it was like hashtagging, and everything had to be like a social moment, behind a backdrop, and they were all going to share it. And now it seems like people want things to be a little bit more secretive and less like out there in the social world. So now it's about, like with Westworld, not a lot of people got to do that. And those people who did thought they were just like so cool, and that was important to them. So like they're saying the same thing, you just got to be creative and make sure that you're watching that generation.
Last question for me, then I want to turn stuff over to the audience. We talked about how social media is important. There's this thing going on right now where people are kind of going like, I don't want to necessarily do Facebook, or maybe Twitter's weird and I should delete my account, all that kind of stuff. Are you worried about that having like a boomerang effect on this kind of work, the interest in creating this kind of stuff?
Well, Mr. Zuckerberg lost like, I think, $16 billion the other day, or some ridiculous number. Things changed, the older I am, I can remember when people used to say, you kids, and then you get to a thing where you're looking down saying, you kids, because everything changes, everybody's always gets their turn at the plate to be the 16-year-old, the 18-year-old, the 25-year-old, until, they need reading glasses like the rest of us. I think you have to keep doing things that are cool, that can appeal to a broad audience. And if that broad audience includes the young people, that's great, but that's one quadrant. If you're hitting all four quadrants, as they say in the business, then you have a chance to do something that's more successful. So I try to not just think about what the teenagers are into. I try to think what's going to appeal to the teenagers, what's going to appeal to their parents, what's going to appeal to the single person coming, what's going to appeal to grandparents that can sit there and watch people go by and say, oh, that's cool. I don't want to get up there and dig for an hour in the ground to get a fucking drink token, but I'll sit on this bench and watch the people go by and think those people are really cool in their costumes.
The drink tokens were cool though, man. They were good.
They sure were.
Okay, I want to give you guys a chance to talk to these people. Sure.
The part of experience design I'm curious to hear you talk about is expectation setting. And you compared designing these and the challenge of coming up with new things to movie sequels, and literally with some of these activations, for series that are going on a long time, you might not be the first agency or the first team working on this property. Do you have conversations about what other agencies have done, like for Westworld or these other big movie series, or is that not even part of the conversation?
I think going back to what Josh said at the beginning, and what Christie was referencing, is you're trying to, I think, to get a sense from whoever your client, whoever's paying the bill is like, what are they trying to achieve here? On Westworld, for example, they had done things where it was more of the Delos beat, where it was smaller, it was confined, it was the intake sessions between the psychologists and the guests and stuff like that. That wasn't what they were trying to do. What they were trying to do is they wanted to create Sweetwater. They wanted to make you feel like you were in that town. And so once I know that that's what they're trying to do, it's not that I'm dismissive of what the other agency did or the previous activation, it's not applicable. And then where it was, for example, I looked at documents of how did they deal with guest interactions, and I compared to my guest interactions document, and I was like, oh, there's some compelling ideas there that I hadn't thought about. That's a really good idea. I'm going to borrow that, thank you very much. But it doesn't mean I'm going to throw away the stuff that I developed over the years that worked for me. Because that's frankly, from my angle of it, dealing with the performer aspect of it, is I have to be able to work with people who can both be an actor and a writer and a director and a producer all in the same moment, because they have to be able to make decisions that aren't going to be edited, that aren't going to be shaped, that aren't going to have the benefit of 4 months of rehearsal. They're going to have the instincts and the sense of what I'm trying to go after, but also know this person that's coming at them is bringing energy to them that I can't possibly script or prepare for if I live to be 100 years old. They have to make those decisions and deal with those things.
So I was just at Comic-Con, did the Castle Rock experience, it was wonderful. But it was really a two-part experience, right? There was the physical experience, the house, and then across the street in the park there was this Snapchat code, this kind of AR piece. What do you guys think about this kind of blending, rather than a fully VR experience, fully physical experience, this concept of kind of blending the two and bringing them together into kind of a cohesive experience?
I thought it was kind of awesome. In truth, so for those of you that were not there and that didn't hear, Castle Rock was spread out over 2 blocks, and one sort of major block was the Castle Rock Bed and Breakfast, which was a sort of more traditional 15-minute walk-through haunted housey kind of thing. And then the other block was this large forest, and that's where the car was in the water, and there were all these little Easter eggs around and little things that you could do. That was actually supposed to be filled with actors, and it was actually supposed to be a full continuation of the bed and breakfast experience, and just in a budget, creative time kind of way, it just kept getting cut, and it basically turned into a Hulu branded lounge, is kind of the bottom line, with a couple of Easter eggs. I thought it was kind of cool. I mean, it provided people a place to hang out and drink some water and like do Hulu shit. And I think that they're there for a reason. They're there to promote Hulu and get people to sign up for Hulu and to get excited about Castle Rock, and that's number one. The fact that the show was cool and that we're doing a haunted house was kind of secondary to that marketing thing. And I think within that realm, Hulu was very smart to create an experience for 10 people and for 200 people. And in that sense, they expanded their reach in a really smart way. I wish that the lounge was able to be populated with the actors and was able to be activated in the way that the B&B was. It wasn't, and that's just, what can you do? But I thought it was, pretty smart of them. They were thinking on a large scale.
That's a really good idea, though. What do you guys think about incorporating AR in particular, but also VR and other technologies into these kind of physical installations?
If I'm looking at it from the other side, I think that the AR and VR really need the experience around it. Otherwise, you're just walking up to a headset, and then that's kind of that. It definitely elevates an experience. I've done it very similar to Castle Rock, where you had a little bit of an experience, and again, it was for it when we did the VR bus, where the first half of the bus was like a sewer, and it kind of gets you all jumpy because it has bursts of air in your face, and you get all jumpy, and by the time you're there with the VR set, you're already scared shitless, and this just brings it to a new level. So I think it's great. I think technology is just a good add-on to any experience.
I had kind of a surreal moment online earlier this spring. I think it was for the Ready Player One activation. On one of the Facebook groups, they were advertising the activation to go to it. And then 2 or 3 days later, there was a post that was obviously them looking for actors to help them staff the experience. And it was slightly meta, but also very cool because the same community was both supporting the content creators and the consumers. But it brought up an interesting question for me, which was, how hard is it to find actors to help you put on these events? Is it a hard sell for you, or are actors clamoring to kind of jump in and do this kind of work?
I find that they're clamoring for it, and I get a lot of pissed off people that I don't cast them.
Yeah, I had a really hard time with Castle Rock, I will say. I don't know if it was because it was in San Diego, but like almost everybody was an LA-based actor and they came down for it. I think a lot of people want to do it. I have a hard time casting people that I want to do it. When I'm doing Blackout and Strangers, it's relatively easy to a certain extent, but for some reason this particular Castle Rock one for me was actually quite challenging getting the crew together.
I find it's pretty easy to find actors out of work in New York and LA. Other markets can be a little bit difficult, and to the standard that you want them, right? That's really important.
But I think that's really the key. It's like, yes, you can find more bodies, but finding people who can really be successful at this, that can really take your work, my work, your work, and take it to the next level and really be the stars out there that are more guest-facing. That's what you're really trying to find, people that can do that.
And I'll just reiterate what you said earlier, which is you're ultimately looking for actors that can be producers, actors, and directors kind of all at the same time, because you're trusting them to make split-second decisions without you, without being edited. And they might be representing your work, and you're literally back in a tent having no idea that that's happening. But the vice president or the EP of Hulu is actually going through the show right now, and that actor is representing you. And that's a scary thing to put into someone's hands,
especially if your better team is on break right now.
Oh my God! Yeah. And then there's that.
Yeah.
Back there.
Yeah, so you guys touched on VR a little bit, and I really like hearing about I haven't experienced the kind of mixed experience with the VR identity experience. That sounds really cool, a cool application. Because in general, I feel like, VR, it feels like something new, but there's such limitation with the goggles and all that stuff. I'm just wondering from your guys' perspective, do you enjoy working in the VR environment? Do you see something coming where you can, what do you see coming in that particular
movement? People moving in VR as opposed to just sitting in a chair or standing in front of a rail. That's the next thing that's happening that's very, very cool, and some people are developing very compelling experiences that you can move and hold things that feel more tactile, that make you then feel like you're doing something like I was talking about earlier that's more experiential, it's just voyeuristic. The challenge, and I appreciate what Christie's saying about it's cool to have AR and VR and these things. What you can do is you can aim at a finite date that you're going to open on this date, and you can develop something for that date, and you can do the best job you can with your budget. If I'm doing a permanent installation, I'm doing a family entertainment center, or I'm doing a theme park, the development process is so much longer that I'm trying to, more than anything, hold a line in my budget for VR, because the thing that I'm actually going to do 2 years from now hasn't been figured out yet. Because everybody's working at it so hard that by the time you get to start actually then producing the elements, you're going to want the thing to be as cool as you can. It's not there yet. The joke about Disneyland is Tomorrowland is Yesterdayland, because the minute that you come up with something that's cool, especially in the world we're living in now, technological advancement comes so fast now, and the breakthroughs are so fast that it's hard to stay too far into the future.
I'm a little nervous about the whole VR thing, to be honest. I don't really think it's panning out the way that anyone's expecting it to pan out. Working for 2-Bit and being really decently well-versed in the room scale VR and motion VR, and you have your Hologates, Asterions, Birdly, all those crazy-ass new VR things. They're not consumer ready, and the technology is not going fast enough to get it consumer ready. And you're still dealing with people getting sick. You're still dealing with low quality VR. It's a very, very hard medium, and it's a hard medium to produce, and it's a hard medium to, not to manifest, but it's a hard medium to get out into the world to a certain extent. Like, there aren't enough platforms for it to really have the leap that it's having.
Well, not only that, but like movies, once everybody had 5-point sound in their things and the comfy things and the big screen TV, who needs to go to the movies and have some punk talking behind them and kicking them in their seat anymore? Because they can have an equally, if not better, experience in their home.
Right.
VR, you can put on your glasses yourself and have a very good experience. What are you going to do? What am I going to do? What are you going to do out there in the marketplace that you're charging me money for that's going to exceed that experience? That's the creative and business challenge.
But I still think that we are in a spot where we can step above VR. I don't think it's reached that real true zeitgeist level yet, and I think that we still have the ability at this point, and maybe I'm going to be wrong, but I mean, I can tell you again, within the 2-bit model, like everybody's, kind of stepping back a little bit, and I'm making a prediction that I'm not entirely sure VR is going to pan out the way we all think it's going to.
Well, there's also the element too of the work that all three of you do, which is by performers, actors, actual face-to-face human interaction, which we can't do algorithmically in VR yet. And while it'd be cool if we can do it, we don't know when that's going to happen yet. And I feel like that's going to be a big thing when F1 Experience is going to plant together. Like that's actors with a special sauce right now, right?
I think so.
So what's the best experience immersive-wise that you've experienced yourselves, not your own work, not your, just out in the wild, like Ben Chappelle that or whatever?
Okay, I just did something a month ago called The Guest and the Host Make Music, which just blew my friggin' mind. It's as simple as it gets. It's in LA. It's literally a one-on-one recording session, basically. You sit down with a musician in his recording studio, and he leads you through a series of things where you create a song. And at the end of your 90-minute session with him, you have a song that you created. You set the tempo, you make all the music, and there's no narrative to it. It's not experiential in the sense that you are in a recording studio, so in that sense it is experiential, but it's, there's no fog, there's no lights, there's no show per se, but it was one of the most simple, effective, and powerful and truly individual experiences, and to me that's what this immersive world is all about. I want to have an experience that's kind of very unique and that comes from my head, and I use a platform that they give me and I fill it with my own stuff, and it truly was one of the most effective and heartwarming. I cried, I don't mind saying it, it was really nice. So The Guest and the Host Make Music is my bet.
I never get to have any fun and go do things. On the large scale, I'll go to a different thing than something small and intimate, because when you find those are truly wonderful. I think the hardest ones to do and to pull off well are on the hugest scale possible. For me, walking along Universal in Florida and trying to figure out where the fuck Diagon Alley was, and going around this corner that I thought was the way to the bathroom, and being in Diagon Alley was one of the coolest moments I've ever had.
I mean, I'm the same. I don't get to do a lot of the experiences that I see. I read about them, and then I like Westworld and wish I was there and wish I knew you before this. But just recently at Comic-Con, actually, for the History Channel, the Blue Book, it was really simple, probably not a lot, but the actors were so good that it actually elevated the experience a lot for me. Like the guys, it was the military type thing, and if you were talking in line, they were screaming in your face. If you admitted that you believed in aliens, they took you aside, they interrogated you in front of everybody. The actors made it so cool, and it was really just such a simple activation.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think I saw one more question back there. Yeah?
So Josh, you had that $600 per person number. I was wondering if you guys had similar numbers for Dark Harbor for the It House?
The It House, yeah, the Eagle House. Let me do some
I know
quick
the Dark
math.
Harbor number is going to be very different, but more so the It House.
I think the number might have been higher than 600 a person, actually. It was probably pretty close. It might have been like 500 a person. It's expensive.
So I get the whole impression thing, how that's really gray. How in the world do they justify that?
I think that's what we said.
Yeah.
We have no friggin' idea. Truly, it is a little mind-boggling to a certain extent, but you get the social media impressions, it
Yeah.
creates buzz. It's buzzworthy, and
Yeah.
I think sometimes you know it when you feel it. I mean, I've done things where people are talking about it, it's cool, oh, it sounds like people like other things. And then there are things where it's just off the hook, it's like, what the fuck is going on? That you like cut through the noise. And people are talking above the noise about something. And then it's sort of like, I don't give a shit when anybody tells me how many impressions it is, I know it's there, you know? And that's what I think marketing is trying to do, is they're trying to get above the noise, to have something that people are actually talking about that's gonna move the needle with whatever that product is.
Like with Westworld, I don't know how many people were able to go through that total.
It's like 5,000 people
Yeah.
went through it.
But everyone knew about that.
Everyone
I
knew.
didn't go, I knew about it, I watched Westworld, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it becomes, you know, going back to your thing, why do it again? It's like it's like an old fishing tale, you know, that fish gets bigger and bigger each year. You tell the story about, you know, how
Yeah.
big it was, you know, because it just became an hit moment, and you know, that's just catching lightning in a bottle. We just got fortunate. Everybody worked hard, everybody did a great job, but we also got very, very fortunate.
I think we're about out of time now. Everybody, thank you for coming, and please applause for Randall and Wally and Christie.